Police in Paris have shot and killed a knife attacker who killed one person in the Opera District on Saturday evening. 4 others are injured, 2 of them seriously. Police are investigating the incident as a terror attack. RT France correspondent Lucas Tua joined us directly from Paris with details.
The attack happened in this very busy district of Paris. It's a touristic place where there are a lot of restaurants, lots of bars, theaters. The attack happened a bit before 9 p.m., a moment where all Parisians and tourists were outside. So basically people were eating in restaurants, having good times with friends. A man assault randomly several people with a knife. According to witnesses, the man was walking in the streets, crazy, stabbing every people he met on his way. Then he ran towards police officers, apparently shooting, "Kill me or I kill you." Several people heard him saying Allahu Akbar. Then he has been killed by police officers. The metro lines of the area has been closed for now, and all the neighborhood is buckled. Other people were blocked also in restaurants and bars, so it was really a panic scenes there. We know that an investigation is now open by the anti-terroristic section in Paris. We just heard that ISIS, Islamic State, claimed responsibility for this attack.
French prosecutors say they are treating the stabbing as a terrorism-related incident. This is the 5th such attack that has hit France in the last 2 years. The latest incident comes despite French President Macron lifting the state of emergency in the country last October. Now, in February, a man with a machete attempted to enter the Louvre Museum. No one was killed or injured. A month later, an attempted attack on Orly Airport left 1 person injured. That attacker was shot by the police. In April 2017, an Islamist opened fire on police on the Champs-Élysées. ISIL claimed responsibility, and in October, the city of Marseille saw a stabbing at a railway station. 3 people died, including the attacker in that. All right, let's now cross live to Jennifer Breeden, who is an international criminal law attorney. Jennifer, thanks for being with us. We were just discussing in the break, you and I always happen to meet under these circumstances, but you're the mind that I want to get into when it comes to situations like this. So police are now investigating the attack as a terror case. What was your first reaction when you heard the news of this attack there in Paris?
It was the same thing. Again, I was going to almost be annoyed. I mean, we've seen this pattern over and over in European nations. I think Paris has actually gotten better, where they don't want to jump to conclusions. But I mean, there's certain things that always point to ISIS or the Islamic State as being the perpetrator, one of their soldiers, so to speak. I mean, we're talking either van attacks, car attacks, purposely running into people, or especially knife attacks. It's much harder to get your hands on a gun or a firearm. So in Europe, when their soldiers carry out an attack, it's going to be with a knife attack, something very, very easy for them to get. So it's immediately what I thought. It's also one of the buzz places that some of their soldiers have gone around Europe is Paris. They've been there, even though the French forces and French army has tried to say that they've ramped security and things like that. They still have enough ISIS followers, ISIS soldiers. Plus, ISIS has changed the ideology. They've changed their commands to their followers. Hey, we're losing ground. They have lost ground in Syria and in Iraq, many other places, in terms of their own headquarters. So their now modus operandi is to tell their followers, wherever you are, whether it's in Europe, North America, but especially in Europe, carry out your attacks where you are and do it there.
Now, just before you came on, we did a little bit of a rundown of the incidents that have taken place in France. The 5th terror attack in that country in the last 2 years. This always begs the question about, security, freedom versus the security of the public. Is this simply a lack of proper policing, or is there something perhaps deeper, social issues motivating people to do these sorts of attacks?
Well, in terms of motivation to do these attacks, I mean, they always say, and that's kind of been the public outcry, is that anybody that's attacking, ISIS in Syria or Iraq is going to be part of this. Of course, France has been one of those coalition forces. But I mean, that's no different than some of the things that Russia has done or some of the other nations have done against ISIS or terrorist forces in Syria. So, one of the reasons for this, if you look at the ideology of ISIS, which they don't publicize as much, is to completely cleanse the world, especially from democratic or secular values, and that starts with the West, namely Europe, North America. The reason that the West is an easy target for ISIS, a very easy target, especially places in Europe, is because they've used those liberal values, freedoms, equality, things like that. They've put those over safety for people. And you are right. That begs a very important question. You know, when is it too much? So there's security, there's national security for the civilians, and then there's also freedoms. And I think that's one of the guessing games that the West has had a very difficult time playing with, not just Europe, but North America, the U.S., and especially Canada, is that they seem to be weighing more so on the side of, especially in the U.S. with our last administration, on the side of we want all equality, freedom, we don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, rather than national security concerns. I think France has been playing that game for a while. They've always weighed more on the side of freedom, just being France. I think in the last couple years, because of the number of ISIS attacks in the area, they've had to be stronger, but still that's not going to stop the fact that, that people are going to be able to do this. But thankfully, only one person, in addition to the actual attacker, was killed. And so more people weren't killed. And I think that shows that French troops are at least getting a little better about stopping it right when it starts.
Now, we have to be careful about, you know, eyewitness accounts and what have you, but we do have reports that the attacker screamed Allahu Akbar before attacking people there. That is a cry which, in its basic essence, it doesn't really amount to much, but it is, in the West, what we think of as a battle cry, which it really isn't. But assuming this does turn out to be motivated by Islamic extremism, what do you think is the reason? I mean, you touched on it just a little bit a second ago about this ideology and about that it's not really publicized. Talk to me a little bit more about that ideology of Islamic extremism in Europe.
And it's, you know, it's a good point. There have been a couple reports. Again, this is still an unfolding story. There have been a couple random reports, and again, it hasn't hit mainstream yet, that ISIS said one of its soldiers claimed responsibility for this. And as you said, eyewitness accounts about Allahu Akbar. In terms of the ideology, having researched this is where I started my research. There are end times ideologies. These are really belief systems that a fringe aspect of Islamists or you know, Muslim followers of extremist or radical elements. They're really trying to prepare their end times, the end of the world for them. One of those things, and it's a fringe belief system, but it's saying that in order for their Messiah or their, you know, their God, their Christ, their final Imam to return to earth, to really usher in this global caliphate for them, they not only need to start preparations to set up the caliphate, they need to cleanse the streets of all infidels. That means even Muslims that are moderate or peaceful or things like that, they need to cleanse the world of all of that, starting with the secular democratic systems of the West and Europe. And so, you know, that's one of the basic ideologies that has really started this group and has perpetuated them, even so much so as being saying that they are part of the end times regime that's going to set up this caliphate. And so that's what started this. It's also very easy for them to get into Europe. There have been open border policies because of Europe's more liberal policies, and that's why it's made them more of an easy target, not wanting to offend anybody or things like that. Whereas, you know, why I love my work, I work in the Middle East with a lot of Muslims who fight this kind of radical Islamist ideology, and they have no problem saying what it is. Hey, these are radical Muslims, extremists. They go out and they do this, and that's what the West needs to become better at doing.
So you touched on Europe's policies there. Let's talk about President Macron specifically. He replaced that international state, or that national state of emergency rather, with his counterterrorism laws. Do you think that's strong enough to deal with these types of incidents, or is there anything, I mean, can we police everything all the time?
We really can't. And that's what, you know, it's hard to say because we know that the Islamic State is evil. Of course, this is in fact them. There are some reports saying that this was them. But just to put it in this perspective here, when ISIS or ISIL type fighters or militants trying to carry out these attacks, the reason they've been successful, and we need to be careful because we know how evil they are. And so sometimes we underestimate people that we disagree with or we know are evil. But they're actually very smart because what they've done is rather than carry out some big military attack or things like that, they'll get a car, they'll get a truck, they'll get a van, they'll get a knife, and they'll do something that really nobody, no matter how good your police force is going to be able to take out right away. And that's because of past policies. So even if President Macron has enacted this counterterrorism policy in his nation, he already has past years, even if he wasn't involved with those, of open door policies, allowing anybody to come in, not wanting to infringe on privacies and not wanting to offend anybody. That's allowed the growth of this. So it is going going to be hard, especially for these nations who spent so many years not wanting to offend, that they've already grown the presence and come into there. And now these leaders who are here now are going to have to say, okay, we really cannot restrict that many freedoms. We can't just take people down because we don't like the way they look. And so it's going to have to train police to be almost psychic in a sense, or vigilant, in order to see the future of what's going to happen, which is really going to be very unlikely.
All right, Jennifer Breeden, international criminal law attorney, someone who I wanted to talk to when this came down the pipeline, and I was lucky enough to get to do that. Thanks for being with us here on RT International.